Kevin Smith and his films have inspired many independent filmmakers, and I am certainly one of them. I've always known that Kevin and Jason, aka Jay and Silent Bob, have been gamers. So I knew I had to find a way to talk with them during Unlocked. After a few emails and an opening in Kevin's schedule, he invited me to his home in Hollywood, California. And after a thoroughly entertaining interview where we discussed everything from early arcade games to virtual reality, I wanted to switch gears and catch Kevin and Jay up on the current state of the video game industry. So, Kevin and Jay, we thought we would prepare a special Video Games 101. And this is where the industry and the community of gaming is.
Teach me, brother.
So like film and television, games have genres and subgenres. Action, adventure, a lot of the characters you know
This
here.
guy I know. This guy I know.
Role-playing, so the difference obviously from action adventure to role-playing is the focus is more on the characters. Casual games, as you mentioned.
Yeah, I'm an Angry Birds guy. I don't do Words with Friends. I do Scrabble.
So moving on from casual, we got shooters. So obviously, Jay, that's your world there.
That's where he lives and breathes.
Strategy, you think of yourself as a general, so you're managing fleets and factions. So sports, obviously, those have come from, you know, a little square.
From Pong to NHL 15.
Yeah, racing the same.
There was racing on that Odyssey deck.
You remember the screen overlays that you would put on?
Yes!
And so it really
the Magnavox Odyssey, dude, like they had these overlays in the box that you put over your TV screen so that you had like marks of a football field or a hockey rink or something like that.
Or a driving.
Yeah. Or a driving for doing this thing.
Yeah.
So like what the graphics weren't in the game only, the graphics were plastic graphics on the television.
Yeah. Of course, the biggest difference in open world versus linear. Linear being, you know, I'm going to play through mission 1, 2, 3 to the boss. Open world, like, you know, Red Dead Redemption, you could get on a horse and go ride out into the sunset and build a fire and hang out there all day and then come back and do a mission.
There's sleeping bags and you can decide to sleep and come back when it's daytime or nighttime.
So wait, you start the game and then you could choose to go to sleep and walk away from the game?
Yeah, like you can decide in the game, like, hey, me and my buddies, like, hey, let's go to sleep. And you like, I guess, roll out the sleeping bag, go to sleep. And you could either start playing again where it's daytime and you could see the zombies, or it's nighttime and you gotta like creep around and you can barely see it.
Like you've said sleeping bag so many times that to you, the selling point is like, we get to have a sleepover.
Yeah, exactly.
That's adorable.
That's awesome. Okay, so now going into gamer stats. These are some of the latest statistics. So who plays games? The biggest category is us guys.
I believe that because we were there for the birth of video games and we've watched them grow and we've grown with them.
This is also surprising. Most people think that this would be a lot.
Yeah, most people assume that boys is 3/4 and girls is this. It's nice to see it's almost 50-50.
So our gamer social.
Gamers are social. We all find our own tribes, you know, in real life. You and I think alike. I'm gonna hang with you, man. We get along. We also do this thing together. So the idea of like, I understand how some people like kids, they hole up in their rooms, play those games, they get isolated and stuff. Nah, they're building their world. They're finding their tribe, man. And their tribe are people that think exactly like them.
That's right. So we've got 49%, almost half of all U.S. households own a dedicated game console, so Xbox, PlayStation, and most that do on an average of 2.
This makes sense as well. Like a chicken in every pot and 2 gaming systems in every home as well.
That's right. So in 2003, the global video game industry was just over $23 billion.
Okay.
And if we fast forward to where we are now,
holy crap,
we're almost at $90 billion globally.
That's insane.
So
we're in the wrong business.
Yeah, right.
Why are we getting a film, man? This is where the money is.
So by comparison, this is how it breaks down. Games are far and away the leader.
Clearly.
So a lot of people say that, you know, when you ask them the question, where do you think games will be in the next 10 to 20 years? Everybody gives some version of the holodeck as the answer.
Holodeck, man, is like aiming low. Here, shoot the moon. There's a pill that you take. You're gonna be in the world. There's gonna be no more plug-in. There's gonna be no, I have to do this. It's, and then wait 20 minutes and suddenly you're like, looking for a sword, where's Zelda? But you know, they gotta put you in a room away from people.
Away from
doing all
a room like
this.
this.
Yes. So it does take you to the holodeck. Yeah. I guess the holodeck it's unavoidable.
Now, is this like in the movies where if like the rope snaps on your ankle and you fall, like you really...
Yeah, if you die, Oculus, you die in your life.
Yeah.
Oh my God, that's cool.
You want a bungee?
Yeah. That was weird. What are they going to do in the future?
I have no idea. I like your idea, but I don't know this. I feel like your idea comes with then you start getting hooked because craving that pill and you're just like, I want to play one more game. All of a sudden you're robbing.
We're going
to go with the holodeck.
We were on the verge of great financial success, you and I, with the gaming pill. And then you scared everybody off.
I did, sorry.
Right back to plugging in.
So close.
No, we could have been rich.
It's a small town jukebox rock and roll. Yeah, like Coltrane playing when it hits your soul.
I was first exposed to video games in this triangular video game system called the Odyssey. It looked like this. It was a big triangle, and it had on one side a little steering wheel. And on the other side, it had knobs for Pong. And then on the other side, it had a gun with a holster for shooting ducks. So it had 3 games. And the cartridge was a triangle, and it went right in the middle. And I remember the first time they hooked it up to the TV. It was like, let me see, that had to be like 78, 77 maybe? It was around Star Wars. Because suddenly we were in the future. Suddenly, like, you could control images on the television.
You were Chewie.
I was like Chewie. And my father and my mother were like Han Solo combined. So I spent a lot of time doing that. And it was like a family thing. Like, that was so novel that the family gathered around. Remember, we didn't have cable or the internet or cell phones to look at. So sometimes we just looked at each other. Suddenly we had something else to look at, but be together at the same time. You could be doing this activity that didn't require you to leave the house and still having a good time with your kids. So I think he was like, this is a way to hang out with the kids and not have to fucking leave the house. So they bought this Odyssey system, and we would sit down as a family, and everybody would get a turn, and like you'd shoot and you'd do the racing game. The Pong thing was the only like 2-player event. So the rest of the time, people just watched.
That's when you're rooting against your family. You're like, I hope he dies.
Yeah, I was just like, I never thought I'd say this, but I hope my mother dies. I hope her car goes right off the track and goes up in flames so I can get a turn at the Odyssey. So that was we did that for a while. And then Atari got really big. Atari 2600 was massive, and all the rich kids already had it, and all the middle class kids had it. And I was lower middle class. So we didn't have Atari 2600, nor do we have in television. ColecoVision was a fucking dream that a poor kid who ate government cheese would never be able to afford. And they had the best graphics. The Donkey Kong literally looked like the Donkey Kong in the arcade, as per my memory. I bet you if you go back now, it didn't. But like in my memory, I was like, this looks exactly like the arcade. Because the 2600 graphics was so 8-bit. You know, they're like, this game's Superman. And you're like, how can you tell? And they're like, because these blocks are blue and red. And you're like, oh, I get it, I understand. On ColecoVision, like Donkey Kong looked like Donkey Kong. So we never had a system. We didn't have a 2600 until it had been out for a while. I would say like 2 years. We were already building up popularity in Steam because there were a bunch of cartridges out in the world. And the Empire Strikes Back game that Parker Brothers did, it was out right around that time. That was the tipping point where I was like, Mom, I can't play Empire Strikes Back without an Atari 2600. The dream of, they had one graphic, and it was like terrible little 8-bit graphic. But in my head, it was like, it was going to be virtual reality in 1982. Like, I'm going to be in the cockpit of a snow speeder, and I'm going to be going under, snow walkers, AT-ATs and shit. And of course, it was like a scrolling game. So my dad was a big newspaper reader, and in those days, before the internet and whatnot, now you can go on Craigslist and shit. Back then, you go to the want ads in the newspaper. So my old man went through the want ads in the Asbury Park Press, and he found a family selling an Atari 2600 with an assortment of 20 games, and they were all like, the fucking legendary best games you would want. But we went as a family, entire family, me, my brother, sister, my dad, and mom, to this house in Freehold, pulled off the main road and stuff, pulled up, it's like a farmhouse, and they let us in the house, and what you see is like 2 parents, and you see 2 kids sitting on a couch, one of them in tears, like bawling. And you're like, oh my God, we just walked into like, fucking American Gothic farm scene. These fuckers are losing the farm. And they're crying about it. That wasn't it at all. The kid was being punished for bad grades. The parents were selling the Atari 2600 and all the games. So you want to talk about a Sophie's choice, man, or like here I am going like, look, I want an Atari 2600, but at the cost of these people? Like, and these people were my people, they were kids. I looked at them, I saw myself. And all I could think was like, yay for me, shit for them. Like, this is gonna suck. What does one do? Couldn't push my parents to be like, no, go store-bought. I need to get a plastic wrap because they deserve their system and I deserve one out the box. We were lucky to be having this conversation at all. So at the end of the day, you know, I weighed a certainty against a doubt, and I was pretty fucking certain I wanted that Atari 2600, and I doubted I'd think much about the kids after I fucking left. So I was like, yeah, all right, let's do it. But at what a price? You know what I'm saying? Now, later in life, in history, I'd read about how fucking when the Nazis took over Germany and shit, they just took over people's houses and wealth and art and claimed it as their fucking own and shit. And I fucking went to my parents that day and I was like, you remember when we did that thing where we bought those kids 2600 and they were crying at the farmhouse? We're like modern day Nazis. You know, my mom and dad weren't having that. They were like, you wanted the game. They blamed me and shit. They were like, we were just following orders. Did you ever play in an arcade?
I used to go to the pizza place down on Bay Avenue. That's one across from Welsh Farms, and they had, they had the I can't remember the Gauntlet, and that was it was amazing. Yeah.
My jam was Cumberland Farms, right down the block from me. So literally walking, I was sent there every other day for like bread, milk, whatever the fuck. And these were in the days where you could let a child roam free. Like we grew up in a town called Highlands, New Jersey, where kids could stay out all night. This motherfucker would walk the streets till 1, 2 in the morning. But when video games hit, kiosks showed up. They got Centipede at Cumberland Farms with the rollerball. And oh my Lord, that became like, you know, I've never been an addict. Some people are like, you smoke a lot of weed. I smoke a lot of weed, but I'm not like, I need it and shit. You've had addiction problems, but I've eaten a lot of food. All right, I've been addicted to sugar many times. So I do know something about addiction. But that Centipede was my first real taste of it. Because I wasn't even that fat in those days. But that was something where I fiended. The first time I was able to I put 1 quarter in the game and 3 quarters up on the sign up top, which was the universal, you know, fucking signal to everybody, fuck off, I've got the next 3 games. In college, some people, like when they have somebody over their room to fuck, they put a tie on the door. This was that. This was like you were at a video game. It's like marking your territory, like a dog sprays on something. You put your quarters up, man, and it was yours. And for some reason, it like counted. Like it was this weird civil law, like this unspoken like gentleman or kids agreement. Well, because it wasn't just boys, it was girls, of course. So it was more like this unspoken kids agreement or gamers agreement that like the order of the quarters is who goes next. And like bullies respected that. Like I'd go to Cohen's Deli and play Asteroids, man. And that was like midtown, downtown, further from me. So a lot of kids went there. And so you put your quarter up and stuff, you'd be in line, some big ass kid, muscles, sleeveless, like, you know, fucking tank top comes in. And he's like, who's next? And you're like, oh, I got next. And instead of being like, fuck off, they'd be like, all right. So I played Centipede at Cumberland Farms to the point of thievery. And then I got caught, like my mom caught me playing the game at Cumberland Farms. She sent me down to get something. I spent so much time there, man. One day I was like, fuck it, I'll just work at a convenience store. And it ruined my life. But anyway, my mom would never go. And she showed up. And all of a sudden I hear, Kevin, and there she is, and just give me that hard look, and I was like, oh, hey, I found a quarter. Like immediately I went into explanation mode. Once my mom caught me, she was like, you're not allowed to ever play Centipede again. I was like, at Cumberland Farm? She said, yes. And so that meant I could go to the arcade at the Mom's Mall and play it and stuff while we were at the mall shopping. That became a huge highlight. You and I only played video games together like way later in life.
Yeah.
Probably like around Clerks or Mallrats. Like, you know, I didn't know him in the Atari days. And by the time we became friends, I guess what systems would be in place? Felt like there was a lull for a little bit where video games where people were like, whatever. Before like the Sega PlayStation, was it the
Neo Geo came
Sega
out.
Genesis. Sega Genesis felt like the rebirth of video games. Suddenly people were like, hey man, I'm getting me a Sega Genesis. You're like, what's that? Like, it's a gaming system, blah, blah, blah. Like Atari, but better. And then people were still in my world referring to fucking Atari because that was the first. It wasn't even the gold standard, but it was the first. And television was like the Pepsi of Atari. Like, we're here too, but like, you know, what a fucking controller. Like, look at this. This is a joystick and it has joy right in it. So you're like, I mean, granted, we're in the world of buttons now and some of this shit, but like the Intellivision control pad looked like, you know, kind of like today's version of a cell phone. It was kind of longer than this, and then it had a bunch of, like a keypad as if it was a phone, and then it had this weird little dial. And everything you did with the dial was kind of pushing this way. I guess it was kind of a forerunner to like the mouse in some way. But this is what we all trained on. And suddenly to have a controller that didn't have that, you were like, why bother? So Intellivision always felt like an also-ran. And then the next big system that came out that was huge was ColecoVision, and that's like, and then I remember after ColecoVision there was the Atom 12 computer, which died, I think, and then I didn't hear anything about video games for a while, and that just might be me, might have just left my world. But the next like video game system I remember hearing about was Sega Genesis, which I guess Nintendo predates that. I was not a Nintendo guy, but then I was a Super Nintendo guy because they had the Empire Strikes Back and Star Wars games, and the graphics were like astounding. And I remember Scott Mosier, like while we were between Mallrats and Chasing Amy, just killing a week playing the game over and over until he got to the end. Like, you know, shit that's pretty common now, but this was at an age where it's just like, are you seriously still playing this game? He's like, yeah, I just want to beat it. So I remember that, and I remember playing Sega Saturn with you because it had that game. I was more like one of the 10 people on the planet that bought a Sega Saturn for Virtua Fighter. Because I loved in the arcade the Virtua Fighter kiosk game, the large standing game. So Sega Saturn was, I think, at least my first gaming system that had like a CD-ROM. It was no longer a cartridge. And so they had Virtua Fighter, so I bought it, and we would play Virtua Fighter a lot because that was just like fun as hell. And he would read and learn moves. So I just liked having the fight, and hey, whoever hits best wins. But this dude was like.
Well, I had played other games before too. My brother had that first game you're talking about with the cube. Was it the triangle thing you said?
The Galaxy Odyssey?
Odyssey. My brother had that.
He had
so
that
it's funny.
triangle system? Really?
Yeah, up at Alice's.
Maybe he got it from my mom. Maybe my mom was just like, his
You
grades
were
aren't good. I was like,
So that's the first game I remember playing, but not too often because I didn't live with my aunt and my brother. But and then my neighbor had ColecoVision. And yeah, I never owned a system either. So same sort of deal where it was just like I'd go to my friends, play Pitfall was one of my favorites. And then start playing with that. But I've never owned a system. It wasn't until PlayStation 3, I think, that I got a system, that I had my own system, and then Xbox.
He didn't grow up with much money in his world. But once he got a little money, the script completely flipped. Like, he became the gamer of the group. He was the first person to go first person in our world. And that fucked me up because I was a side scroller, man. Like, he was showing me this while I was playing Sega Genesis had this awesome Rocky and Bullwinkle game, which, like Scott Mosier, I spent hours getting to the end of because I was a big Rocky and Bullwinkle fan. So that was my speed, and the graphics were amazing for that time. I'm sure if I looked at it now, it would be ridiculous, but the graphics, it looked like Rocky and Bullwinkle, and you controlled the motion and stuff like that. And then all of a sudden he'd be like, try this and put in this game where, you know, it's your point of view. And I was like, oh, this is nauseating. I can't do this. And that became the standard. Like, it took me a while to kind of catch up, to start being into first person games. And I'm still a side scroller guy at heart. I was so happy when the app revolution exploded because it is more of it was the reinvention of the side scroller. You know, and granted, one day on our phones, it's going to be an Oculus sort of experience with a game, but at least for a little while, it harkened back to when gaming began when we were around. Like, that's the thing, we breathe that rarefied air in as much as we were there when it started. Like, my kid was born into a world of video games. She was playing Wii when she was a child. But like, we were there when there was nothing, you know, when there's board games, and you were happy with that. And the most technical a board game got was like Dark Tower, and it had a little computer, you know, system in the middle of it. It was a board game with like an electric rolling of the dice, essentially. And that was kind of like high tech. And then suddenly they introduced the notion of controlling pixels on your television. We didn't even know what fucking pixels were. Controlling pixels on your television and having a good time, like in something that was completely unreal. Like prior to that, you would go to a fair and shoot bunnies and bears, you know, and try to win a prize. Like think about it, or throw darts at a balloon. Those were the interactivity levels of games. And at home, the only gaming you did was like, you know, the game of life or Monopoly, or like the most technical game, the one that was exciting because it felt like action was going on, Trouble, because you popped the thing and the dice would move inside. And suddenly we were in a world where you controlled, you know, they didn't look like E.T. and Elliot, but you controlled E.T. and Elliot, man, as they went looking for Reese's Pieces in a movie that you just saw and you loved. And the box art was amazing, but the game, you know, whatever. But, you know, that was, at that point, we didn't even bitch then. We weren't even like, this looks terrible. We were like, holy shit, I'm playing E.T. It's baffling and puzzling, and I can't get off the screen, but my God, we're playing E.T. So we were there for the beginning of it, man, like seeing it grow. It's so strange. Now it's an industry that's probably bigger than motion pictures, probably bigger than TV, pulls in far more money, right? It's a very lucrative industry. And in the beginning, it began as something way simple. There's no way they could have foresaw where it was going. And even right now, as we talk about it, I don't know if we can foresee where it goes after this. I mean, everyone keeps going like, you'll put on a headset and you'll be in the room and shit, but like, give it another 10 years and suddenly they'll be like, this is the android that you're playing this video game with in real life, motherfucker. Like, it just has to keep escalating. When I first started playing video games, if you wanted to talk to somebody while you were playing a video game, they'd be sitting right next to you, and you know you were usually engaged in a conversation about trash talk. I'm gonna kick your ass. But there were very few versus games in the beginning. There was a lot of like 1 and 2 player, but you have to watch somebody clear 8 Pac-Man boards, then die before you get a chance. So the talking during gaming was more like, die. I hope you die. I want to go next. Die. Why won't you die? So years later, he was the first one to introduce me to the notion of like, I'm playing a game and talking to somebody while I'm playing the game. Blew my mind, man. I got into it just a little bit in the beginning. I played a lot of NHL, EA Sports NHL, and we would do online tournaments.
But it is frustrating when it's a kid and he's whooping your butt. But again, a lot of the stuff now, like I play a lot of Call of Duty where, you know, it's people that are on my team. But then when you're switching sides or you're in the, you know, you're waiting to get into a new game, there's all the dudes like, yeah, man, you suck. There's one dude who was like, hey, man, why don't you come get this grown ass dick, motherfucker? Oh, the story.
Honestly, for me, that would be Rocky and Bullwinkle game on Sega Genesis. It was well written. It was funny. It was played like the cartoon played, with a very adult sense of humor. Not adult like they're doing cock-sucking jokes, but like it was clearly not just aimed at kids. And if you were a hardcore Bullwinkle fan, they put in enough, what they call today, a fuck ton of Easter eggs, if you knew that show as well. So the writing of that game, it wasn't just like, hey, we got a scroller, it's gonna be a moose and a fucking squirrel, sometimes the character will fly, sometimes they'll beat a little Russian man. The people that put it together cared enough to include a lot of stuff in the writing game. So that drove my passion for that game. Probably the game that's the game that I most remember fondly in this world, except for the Lego, Batman, and Star Wars games, because I played those with my kid. That was a whole different experience. I used to play video games with my brother and sister and fight with them, video games with friends and fight with them. But years later, when I finally got laid and had a child, and then she grew up and we would play video games together, she would get mad at me. She would get frustrated because, yeah, I was adept at the games. You know, I've been around, I've been playing games since I was a kid. I stole other farm kids' games, for Christ's sake. So I knew how to play a video game. She was still learning. So, you know, she would, when we played games that were versus games, she would get very competitive. The Lego, Batman, Star Wars games allowed us to play together collaboratively and have fun because they're funny and stuff. And, you know, characters that she was familiar with and I was way familiar with. So, I think about that often. The kid's 15 now and she's growing up. She's a great kid, good head on her shoulders. But every once in a while I look at her and I just remember, laying on the bed, belly down, she's next to me, and we were playing this. It was a weird first and second generation rite of passage to play video games with my kid. And my wife would be like, take her out. Like, go outside. The kid, like, play hide and seek in the yard. I'm like, no, we're going to Gotham. And we bonded over that shit. Like, it was really, really sentimental and nostalgic whenever I think about her and I playing the game. Hours spent playing those games. So years later, they did this game, Lego Batman 3 Beyond Gotham. And I got this call where it was through a confluence of events. They were like, we're making this video game and we would like to put you in it as well. So I became a character in Lego Batman 3 Beyond Gotham. And I remember telling my kid, this is crazy. Remember like playing Lego Batman? She was like, of course. I was like, they just asked me to be in a Lego Batman game. And the kid's eyes got glassy. And then my eyes got glassy because we're both emotional suckers. Even on an emotional level as a parent, video games played a role, man. I told her the story of my first video game system. And because she's got us for relatives, him as an uncle and me as a father, I hope. Some people think he's the father. He's not, she's just blonde and tall. We've been the guys who are like, play this, because we want to play it too. In her room, she's got a big TV, and I put a video game system for the Injustice Gods Among Us video game that me and him did a commercial for and stuff like that. And she played with her boyfriend and stuff. So like, she's always had the latest tech kind of shoved in her face. But it was really nice to be like, video games play such an emotional role in me and the kids' relationship. And all predicated on something, my windows are closed, that my wife was like, this is a waste of time. And I was like, no. I was like, sometimes there's this quiet alone time that you want to spend with people where you're engaged, but you're not engaged. Science has proven like video games are good for cognitive abilities. It just teaches you how to problem solve from a young age. We didn't have them, so we don't know how to solve our fucking problems. We didn't get video games till later in life. But my kids had them since she popped out the womb, so she can problem solve. She'd think like a game, like you gotta X, Y, and Z it, and A, B, and suddenly you're there to get to the next screen. So I honestly, for a guy who doesn't game as much as he games, every morning I wake up and play Angry Birds and Tetris while I shit. I couldn't do that when I was a child. Imagine trying to bring Atari 2600 into the bathroom with a giant ass fucking television, and then your brother being like, "I got next," because you're on the throne playing a game. Now I can do that, and it's weird how games like allow you to be together with people, and they allow you to kind of like ISO up and be by yourself, and still give you a sense of accomplishment. Like that's kind of like the dark side of video gaming is you will spend hours breaking a game, even an app game, hours, money on an app game, a free app game. Suddenly, like for $1.99, you could kill all these pigs. I'm like, holy shit, that's worth the money. And boom, you start paying, and it's just like Vegas, where you're like, all right, it's worth another $1.99. Look how far I've gotten, and you feel this weird sense of accomplishment, and like, I beat the game, or I've gotten this far, I've collected every star for this level. And there is no accomplishment there whatsoever. Like it's a false sense of accomplishment. It's a time killer. You always got to put it in perspective. Like this is a fun thing to do. Unless you're a game developer or somebody who plays professionally for a living, or you put game tournaments together or something like that. For the lucky few, they can make a living out of gaming, or like what was it, Red versus Blue, like Rooster Teeth. Like think about that. How amazing that is. Those dudes figured out how to build a career. And instead of going to work for some other asshole, every morning get up and be like, we're going to do our show, which is now a fucking movie that they raised an ungodly amount on Kickstarter from. They don't even make video games, dude. They just like video games. And one day they were like, let's figure out how to like make our art with this art. And they have a thriving business because of it. That's nuts. People like those cats, people like game developers, obviously, the lucky few who could figure out how to play video games for a living and earn off of it and stuff. For those cats, it's fucking serious business, of course, naturally. But for the rest of us, it's just something to fuck around and do while you got some free time. You know, it's like we as a species, I think we're kind of patently unable to spend that much time alone with our thoughts. Because you start doubting, like, you know, that's what the human psyche is, a little voice that where you are goes the other way. So if you're in a bad place, the human psyche will tell you, hey, things can get better. And if you're in a good place, the human psyche can be like, shit's about to drop out from under you. You know, it's like that's a weird thing to kind of deal with on a regular basis, that voice inside your head. A video game allows you to kind of shut that voice off. You know, you're preoccupied. So you're not thinking about that. Holy fuck, man, I gotta throw another mine off, bang, you know, shit like that. So it's absolutely helpful and fun as fuck. And if you're smart or talented, you could figure out how to live off video games and spend your life playing games. Like, that's phenomenal. Everyone else needs to remember that, you know, we got some other shit to accomplish. You know, gaming is for when you got some free time, you got a weekend off and you're like, fuck everybody, I'm busting this game, fantastic. But it's not accomplishment to get to the 9th screen on Angry Birds and have all the stars. Like, you know, it's something it's accomplishment where you're like, every time I took a shit, I got this far. You know, maybe, because at least you're doing 2 things at once, you're multitasking. But it's not something like, I got every star on Angry Birds, I go to sleep tonight content that I've done well as a human being. Like, you only get one life, you know? And it's like, one day as you're laying in deathbed, struggling, clinging for life, desperate to live, you're gonna sit there and be like, I spent fucking a month trying to break Rocky and Bullwinkle. You know, all the regrets will flood in there. So just, you know, like all things in life, moderation, of course. We did, okay, I can talk about that. We for a while, we tried getting into the world of app gaming. We did 2 games. It was Smartcade, we called it. And one was Fly Fat Ass Fly. Yeah. Which was like, you know, propelling Silent Bob through a mall, picking up coins, knocking shit down. Very cute. And then the other was Let Us Dance.
Yeah, Let Us Dance.
And it was based on Jay. And it was like a very simple, like...
It's almost like Guitar Hero.
Yeah, press the codes and then watch him dance and stuff like that. And some folks liked it, but it did not. It was no Flappy Birds by any stretch of the imagination. It was more like Floppy Cock. It was people were... There were a lot of bitching because we never went beyond like Apple or something like that. They're like, what about everything that's not Apple? And the people that developed the game, they were just developing a game for something else. And then they're like, ooh, we could skin this to be fucking Jay and Silent Bob. So, you know, it was a fun game, totally playable and stuff, but it didn't really travel far. We did not retire off of those games by a stretch of the imagination, but sometimes you don't do shit like that to be like, let's get rich. In our case, we were just like, you're gonna put us in a video game? Like, done and done. And whenever we do Q&As or go out and do live podcasts or whatever, people always ask like, hey man, why don't you guys do like a video game? And it's like, well, we're not talented. Like, we can't do it ourselves. We could play video games. We would need somebody who is like, oh, I totally wanna do, you know, a Jay and Silent Bob video game. You write it and we'll fucking build it and blah, blah, blah. We would not be against that. People, the way people say like, you should do it, it's like, you know, nah, we got better things to do. We would love that. But, you know, I think most people are smart enough to be like, I could invest a lot of money in Halo or what's that game you play?
Call of Duty.
Call of Duty. Or, you know, I can make a Jay and Silent Bob, you know, get fucked up in suburbia game.
We need a League of Legends Jay and Bob, though.
Yes.
Like that same style. That seems to be the big one.
Look at the Dreamer come out. Right? See how it captured his imagination?
It could be all the characters and they fight. I mean, you got to knock down the... Yeah.
See, it's there, and he starts for it, but then he's like, I was in the Batman Lego game, but you were the voice in an app game, right? Like Randall's Monday, it's called?
Yes, Randall's Monday, I did a
You
voice.
and Jeff Anderson.
Yeah, and I got to do a voice and a character in a Scarface game way back. I was the guy who was selling tapes, and like he comes to me and he says, where is he? And I'm like, hey man, what's up? So,
as you can see, that performance.
Yeah, it's just like that.
Insanely realistic.
So I've gotten to do a few voiceover things as well. And again, it is great. It is great to be in any game. But Call of Duty, like I always hear Ice Cube's voice, like where he's like, you know, supply drop. Yeah. I'm just like, I want to do that.
Well, they're not
But
going to let you do that
they're not.
because they looked at your stiff-ass performance in Scarface.
Exactly.
And they were like, this guy's a real human being, and he's acting less than the robot in the game.
No, I think it was pretty good, but
You felt good about your
I didn't want
performance?
to I don't want to do it right here because I want
Let's
them
get
to
a
go
taste,
play it.
man. Let's get
I
a
don't even
taste.
remember how. It was long ago.
So how can you be proud of it?
That's true. Not too good.
Broken. I am the winner. One up me.
Yeah, you got to do. You actually got to be you in the Batman game, right? You're the.
I am. I played Kevin
You
Smith.
have the. You have the game here, don't you?
I do.
We should play it.
We should. I've never really been that deep in the involvement of a development of a game. So, but from what I understand, it's very expensive, and making movies is very expensive. So in that way, they're absolutely alike. It's storytelling. You know, both versions are storytelling. One's interactive storytelling, where instead of reading about a guy getting punched, you're going to punch the guy yourself, but there's still a story to follow. So it's very, very similar. Now you're seeing actors cross over. Isn't Kevin Spacey in a game now or something like that? Voice in what kind of game is it?
Well, the one that you've been playing, Advanced Warfare.
Yeah, Advanced Warfare.
He's
yeah.
the main bad guy. Yeah.
Yeah,
Did you know that?
I did know that, but you have to. It's when you're playing the campaign. I don't play the campaign too often, right? I just like playing multiplayer with other people. I like fighting other people. So I think it's like movie making, but luckily movie making, I guess, can take that long. That new movie was 12 years, right? That just came out. What was it?
Boyhood?
Boyhood, yeah. So some movies can take 12 years or longer than a...
The only guy who's ever going to compare Modern Warfare to Boyhood.
Yeah.
It's exactly the same thing, man.
No, I'm just saying usually the good thing about movies...
Remember in
it's like
Boyhood when
3
they blew
months-
that kid's head apart with an MPG?
I'm saying the good thing
That's
movie,
why I played a game, because it reminds me of Boyhood.
movies are usually about 3, maybe 6 months. But
Now, our movies are 3 to 6 months because they're small and not good. But movies that are movies, they take like a year.
All right, fair enough. Then they're just like video game making.
That's
I
the
should
point.
stop then. See you later. Man,
Honestly, I'm one of those people that when I look at a video game, even the 8-bit version of a video game, I'm like, I can't do it. So I'm impressed, and I'm never like, this sucks. It's challenging to me. I know that the hardcore gamers will sometimes complain about the Thor video game wasn't that hard. I don't know if the game is being sold to be hard as much as it's a souvenir of the movie experience. You know what I'm saying? Like, if you're playing a Thor: The Dark World game, you got to be a pretty big Thor or Thor: The Dark World fan or something like that. So maybe people who are like, I'm more competitive about my gaming should probably stay away from licensed titles, but that's what I lean toward. Like, that's what I love doing most. I loved playing the Superman game on Sega Genesis because it was like the entire birth and death and life of Superman, and you got to fight Doomsday, you got to be the Eradicator. Maybe that was Super Nintendo. I don't think that was Genesis. Yeah, it was Super Nintendo. But that was an amazing game where you felt like, holy crap, we're just like in the comics now. But now, you look at any one of those Batman Arkham games, which they're licensed games, but nobody would ever say oh, it's so easy. Those games defined the new standard for a licensed video game as far as I was concerned. So much so that they've built their own world that doesn't really depend on a movie or a TV show. Their version of Batman and Gotham and all the Rogues Gallery is as popular now as the comic book version or the cinematic version. In fact, probably more popular than the cinematic version in terms of pure sales. But the cinematic version is the sexy, right? It's, hey, there's a movie star, and you put it on a poster, and it's on TV. So people go oh, that's something bigger. But really, if you looked at dollars and cents, man, I think the most influential Batman out there right now is probably the Batman Arkham Batman from all the video games. Because that's how, right now, they introduced the character of Harley Quinn 20 years ago. Harley Quinn just broke within the last 3 years in a big, bad way. And, a lot of people are like, how'd that happen? The only way it could happen, because they put her into the Arkham games, and suddenly you had a bunch of people going, I've never heard of this character. She's very cool. She's the Joker's sidekick. Maybe I didn't watch the cartoon. I'm sorry. So she got introduced to a bunch of people who maybe didn't watch Batman the animated series or read about that character in the comics, and now they're putting her in the movie. She led in the comic, well, in the cartoon first, then comics, then video game. Now the character's going to cinema. When they talk about gaming and violence, to me, it reminds me of when they talk about movies and violence. Like, what an easy scapegoat. Just be like, he played this magic game that the devil was in, and the devil made him go do horrible shit. I go the other way. I feel like if you're doing this, I'm gonna fucking kill you, I'm gonna fucking kill you, I'm gonna fucking kill you. In real life, you're like, hey man, how are you? Because you've just released all your fucking stress, and that's kind of the point of those games. I don't think any game developer is sitting there going like, let's program it so that it makes the user want to go out in real life, do this, go to jail, not be able to buy our game anymore. That don't make sense. Like that goes against business acumen. So, you know, for me, it's a scapegoat to just be like, oh, it's the violence of a video game that makes somebody go out and do something like Columbine. Bullshit. Maybe those kids didn't do it sooner because they were able to sit there and play games. Maybe there are a lot of other people who don't do horrible fucking things to other people because they get it out here. I read about a study not 2 months ago where they talked about like not only does video gaming improve your hand-eye coordination, but there's absolutely no parallel between violent behavior and game playing. You know, it's just like, for years, man, when we were kids, they run the Dukes of Hazzard and A-Team on TV. We didn't have cable or the internet, so we had to watch those two fucking shows. When you watched them, you weren't like, I'm gonna go get in a car and jump a ravine. And you watched it and you loved that they did it, but like it didn't make you go out and do it. Like never once. When you watched the A-Team, you weren't like, I'm gonna go off the grid and fight crimes with a private army. Like no, a lot of people, vast majority of people can differentiate between what is entertainment, what is a pastime, and you know what is reality and stuff. And there's always gonna be bad apples in every bunch. So the same way there are people who take fucking sports too seriously and beat somebody to death in the parking lot. Do you blame sports? Is anybody sitting there going like, hey man, a fan killed another fan right outside a fucking stadium or a baseball park. Let's blame baseball or a great game of football. Of course not. So if you're not doing that, you can't sit around and be like, hey, these kids got killed and one of them liked video games a lot. I saw it on his Facebook page. He's playing an awful lot of that Rocky and Bullwinkle game. Well, they probably wouldn't say that. But that, you know, that's like trying to, you know, connect the dots and have it turn out to be a sheep when really it's a dick. Like you can't connect the dots the way you want, man. And if you do, you gotta do it all the way up the line. You gotta do it for everything, man. You gotta do it for fucking alcohol, which sells like fucking crazy in this country, but when you look at the death reports and fucking homicide reports and murders and shit like that, you know, I'm not gonna say in every case, but a lot of cases, alcohol's involved. Nobody's sitting there going like, fucking alcohol, blame alcohol and shit. Or at least if they are, fucking alcohol don't care because they're sitting on a throne of massive money. But you just can't blame, especially something that leaves tension. You know what I'm saying? Like, it doesn't make you aggressive when you're playing a game. It makes you aggressive within the game, but it doesn't like make you, unless you're one of those assholes throws controllers across the room and shit like that. But I never heard of anybody threw a controller across the room and then was like, that's not enough, and then went out and cut somebody's fucking head off. It don't happen. You know who they gotta watch? Not fucking people that play video games, but just fucking psychotic people. Just fucking sociopathic people. And you can usually spot those cats, man. They're the ones not playing video games. They're the ones hurting squirrels. Talk to those kids before you talk to the guy who's just like, I'm just playing Angry Birds, motherfucker. I was doing this as if you could do this for Angry Birds.